So this is STEM 2, and we are going to continue on with a scale model shed that we're working on. So let's talk about what we've done so far. We have learned to some of the definitions of like a top plate and a sole plate and studs, and we've also drawn a 10-foot shed, 10 foot by 8 feet shed. We've drawn it to a 3/4 inch scale, meaning 3/4 of an inch equals 1 foot. And the cool thing about that is if you think 3/4 is also 12/16. 12/16. Okay, think about rulers have 16ths on them. And so every 16th is 1 inch, because 1/16 is 1 inch, 12/16 is 1 foot, right? So 3/4 of an inch is equal to 1 foot in our scale. Okay, that's the scale we're using. So we've done a wall, a regular wall with just a wall. Okay, then we did a wall with a door in it, something we'll need to have in order to be able to get into our shed. All right, and we've learned some other definitions, like that's a header, and you've got a trimmers right here. And then the way we did this one, we didn't end up getting any cripple studs up there, so we just used another 2x4 and put it in there to fill that gap at the top. It really just depends upon how your shed is going to be built and how you've designed it. That's going to determine, say, like the height of certain things. And I'm pretty sure door heights are standard, but I guess you could also have doors that are higher or lower, depending upon the materials that you're going to use. So anyway, so that was that. Notice that we did the studs on these are each 18 inches apart, 18 on, or 16 on center, 16. Yeah. That's a standard in construction, is to put the studs in a wall 16 inches apart, measuring from the center of one to the center of the other. All right. And so that's actually kind of cool, because 16/16 is 1 inch in our scale. So we just use the inch marker at each one where the studs go. And then we also wanted a window. We'll have a window for our shed. So there we go. We have the header for the window and a sill for the window and those trimmers. And then there's a cripple stud right there. Okay. All right. So I'm using these plans, and I did make a mistake early on when we started doing this in the height of the wall. And we're going to find out together as we go through this. This is probably going to be the first video of probably 3 or 4 videos. And we're going to find out together why that mistake was a big deal, and kind of maybe how we would deal with it if we ended up all the way out on the construction site doing it this way. And then how we might have done it better in the future, so that you can avoid that kind of mistake also in the future. All right, so I'm going to use a online tool called Tinkercad. You have probably heard of it before, especially if this is your second year with me. Then you've probably used Tinkercad last year. And I'm going to show you, I've been working on this on my own. And I hope you guys can see that okay. But I basically put my shed, and I even put a roof on it. I even started putting some decking and sheathing on it. But you can see there, this is completely to scale. It's exactly the size of the scale that we did in the drawing. Watch, I'll select this sole plate right here, and I'll select this little dot here. Look at 7.5, which in our scale, 7.5 inches equals 10 feet. Okay. 10-foot 2x4 is a standard size you can buy of lumber. You could go to Home Depot or Lowe's right now, and you could buy a 2x4 by 10 from them. It's also important that I mentioned that the the lumber, what they do is they cut, I believe they cut a whole quarter of an inch off of the nominal size. So what happens is, here's theoretically what happens is they cut the lumber to 2 inches by 4 inches, and it's a rough cut. Now then they have to plane it and sand it out and make it nice and cut off the imperfections and stuff like that, and they end up taking a quarter of an inch off of each side, and so that totals a half. So a 2 by 4 is not actually 2 inches by 4 inches. It's actually 1.5 by 3.5. And that's a little weird, I know, but it's just the way it is. For the purposes of measurement and putting it in the computer, we're going to use the nominal size of 2 inches by 4 inches. So this would be, you could tell somebody, if somebody was curious about your project and they said, well, hey, well, actually, you could say, yeah, I know. The teacher said we were going to use full-size lumber measurements. So you could possibly, in some places in the country, find a lumber retailer that might be able to get you full-size lumber, 2 inches by 4 inches. But I've never seen it. They used to do that in an long time ago. So let's get started. So what you want to do is go to tinkercad.com, 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 and you want to sign up. If you're 13 or older, you can sign up for your own account. You don't need a classroom account or anything like that. All right. And most of you guys, all my students, I believe, are all 13 or older, so you should be all set to go. Create your own account, and then that way you can use this again in the future for all different kinds of other projects. Notice I was having some fun here with Halloween a few days ago, and then I do other projects in here, obviously. But this is my school account. I also have my own personal account where I have some personal projects that I work on over there. You're going to want to click Create New Design. Okay, and you'll notice the work plane comes up. In the lower right-hand corner, you're going to see a couple little options. One's called Edit Grid and one's called Snap Grid. We're going to click Edit Grid and change the units to inches. Now, I could do this in millimeters, and I could make it like every millimeter equals an inch. I could do a scale like that, but since we're copying what we did on paper into the computer, we're going to use real measurements that we actually did on paper. So I'm going to change units to inches, and under presets, I'm just going to use default is fine. Okay, update grid, and there we go. Now, looking at the grid, I believe that each one of those big squares is an inch. Yeah. Each one of the big squares on the grid is an inch, and you'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 8 of the little squares, which is kind of weird, but that's just 1/8 of a foot, or 1/8 of an inch, excuse me. 1/8 of an inch. So they're in eighths. All right. So it's actually not weird at all. Notice down here we have snap. The snap grid is set at 1/8. Now what that does is, here I'm going to go to a top view, or I'm just going to click and move it, and you'll notice it's snapping every one of those blocks. Now sometimes if you're like, oh, it won't go where I want it to go, or it's snapping past where you want it to go, you might need to come down here and adjust the snap grid. All right, so 1/8 of an inch in our scale, because remember, 3/4 of an inch is 1 foot. 3/4 of an inch is 1 foot. So a 1/16 would be 1 inch. So 1/8 of an inch would actually be 2 inches. I know that might be confusing, okay? But this has to do with scale, right? If I were to draw something to scale, it means that every part of that has been reduced down. Okay, think about scale factor in math class. Every part of it has to be is going to be reduced or increased by that amount. Okay, multiplication or division, right? And so in this case, our 10-foot shed is going to end up being 7.5. It's actually going to be a little bit bigger, and you'll see why. But 7.5 inches, because each 16th of an inch represents one actual inch. And then, each, yeah. Okay, so enough of that. Enough about the scale. Let's talk about Tinkercad a little bit more now. Okay, notice there's a couple different views here. I can hold down the right mouse button and click and drag. If you're using a Chromebook, you can click and drag this little block as well. Okay, or you can click with both fingers and drag around the work plane. This is going to be what works best for you. If you don't have a mouse, then you can still do it. It's fine. You'll be okay. But if you do have a mouse hanging around, I would crack that puppy out and use it, because it's going to be a lot easier to do Tinkercad with a mouse. All right. Now notice when I'm looking top down, notice that this is a 1-inch block right here. Yet it's obviously going past. It looks like it's going past the 1-inch marker. That's because I'm looking at it with a perspective view. This is like as if I was floating in space and I was floating above it and I was moving around it. I would have this different look, this different view of it as I moved past it, right? As I flew over it. Okay. For our purposes, you're probably going to want to switch to orthographic view. And that's this button over here on the left. You've got the home button, which will bring you back in case you get lost. Let's say you're way off here or something, and you're like, I need to get back. Click on the home button and it takes you back here. You can do plus and minus to zoom in and out there. You can also use the scroll wheel on your mouse, or I think 2-finger will scroll, zoom in and out. And then we want to change it to orthographic. So I'm going to click that. Now notice when I look at it from the top view, now it doesn't change the way it looks. Doesn't matter where I have it positioned. I'm looking down on it and it will always appear that way. This is not a perspective view. This is not the way my eye would see it in reality. This is for the purposes of working on it and making sure that all the dimensions look proportionate to each other. All right, so let's get started, and I'm going to use this little piece that I put there, but no, let me get a new one. That way you can do this along with me. So just grab yourself a box, and I just clicked once, and then you don't have to hold. I just clicked once, and you can move your mouse around to put it where you want it, and I'll click again, and now I have a 1-inch by 1-inch by 1-inch box on my work plane. And so if I look at it from the side, and notice I'm clicking these little arrows, and I'm seeing the different sides of it, it looks the same everywhere I am. Okay, I'm going to look at it from the top view for right now, and let's get a couple of our dimensions straightened out. So notice I just click on the box, then click on the little white block in the lower right, or any of the corners actually. Then I can change the dimension right here. Now I have to put in decimals. It doesn't let me put in fractions, but you could do the math, right? If you wanted to figure out a fraction. Fortunately, we're using 10-foot lumber to begin with, and we've already figured out that that's 7.5. The decimal for 7.5 is pretty easy, 7.5. Okay, and then I can click and drag and move it up a little bit. Okay, so now it's 10 feet that way. And if it's going to be a 2x4, and I'm going to lay it down, then it's going to be 4 inches wide at the bottom. If each inch is a 16th, then that is 4/16, or a 1/4 of an inch, right? 4/16 reduces down. You can reduce the top by 2 and the bottom by 2. That would be That would be 2/8. And then you can reduce again. It would be 1/4. So 1/4 is also a pretty easy decimal to figure out. It's 0.25. Just think about money, right? 25 cents is a quarter of a dollar. So 1/4. All right, we've got those two dimensions taken care of. Now I need to change my view. I'm going to switch it like that. I'm going to click once, and then the height is a little bit different. So you got to click on this box right here. And now the height is going to be less than 0.25. 0.25 was 4 inches. So we need half of that. Okay, I know it's hard to figure out half of 25 sometimes, but it's 12.5. Okay, so it's 0.125. And there you go. Notice it changed it to a fraction, 0.0 or 0.125 is 1/8. So you guys, if you work with this a lot, you work with stuff like this a lot, you'll get so much faster at conversions for fractions and decimals, and have a much better sense of numbers. And if it makes sense, because you'd say, oh, well, 1/8 is 0.125. 0.125 times 2 is 0.25, and so that's a quarter. And so, 2/8 is 1/4, and you can just start figuring it out in your head without any kind of memorization. It's just because it's stuff you use all the time. So the more you use math and things or math things in what you do in what you're doing in life, the better you'll be with it. The more fluid you'll be with it. The more fluent you will be at speaking when it comes to numbers. Okay, so you can use a calculator if you need to for any of the stuff we're doing, but I'm thinking I should be able to show you some tricks and how you can figure it out on your own. All right, let's zoom out to the home view. Click that. Oh, I clicked the wrong button. There we go. There we go. All right, so there we go. We've got our 2x4. That's a 10-footer right there. Pretty cool. All right. Now, I need to make a few more of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to click this duplicate button up here, or you can push Control D. Now, when I duplicated it, now there's two. You can't see the other one. It's right on top of it. So I'm going to use this little spin tool thing right here, and I'm going to turn it. And you know what? Actually, I didn't want to do that, so I'm going to undo. I actually want to turn this one right here. And notice I clicked on it once, and then I get this little box. I want to turn it 90 degrees, so I'm going to type in 90 and push Enter. I'll click somewhere else, and notice now I have that 2x4 right there. Now, if I want to change the, whoops. There we go. Okay, so if I want to change the height of it, I click this little cone, and I can pull it up. There we go. Yep, I'll select it again. I'm going to change this to 90. And it's going to be a little bit of a, this is a little bit of a process. You can see. I'm going to change this one to 90 as well. Okay. And now I'm going to show you a trick. If you push D, it will go to the bottom of this work plane. Okay. If you know you're going to be working, here, I'll undo that. If you know you're going to be working at a new plane, which we are, we're going to be putting studs on this to start framing the wall. You can actually drag a new work plane, and you can tell it you want that, the surface of that object right there, to be your new work plane. Just like that. Now when I select this one, if I push D, it actually goes to the edge of that work plane right there. Just like that. Okay, so now that is a 10-footer. Okay, I'm only going to use a 10-footer for my top and bottom plates. For my studs, and this is where I kind of messed up, and we'll work on this. We'll figure this out more in a little bit. But let's stick with my error. we're going to do 96-inch studs because 96 is, divided by 12 is 8. So these are 8-footers, 8-foot studs. Okay. If I wanted an 8-footer, if I take an 8-footer times 0.75, which 1/4 inch scale or 3/4 inch scale, it's going to be 6. So this is going to be 6 inches instead of 7.5. Okay. Oops, come on. So 6 inches right there. And it did it for me. Okay. I'm going to use the arrow keys also to make my life a little bit easier. Watch this. If I'm looking down at it, I can just push the arrow keys, make it go right where I want it to go. Looks like it's going off a little bit. Yeah. So this is going to be a situation where I'm going to change the snap to 16th because what was happening is it's not lining up. See how it's hanging off the edge there? So I changed it to a 16th, and now when I use my arrow, it goes. And actually, I'm going to move them both there. Okay. Now I'm going to change this back to an 1/8. Oops. I mean, the snap doesn't really matter too much. I'm going to put this work plane back right there. Okay. All right. So now I want to add studs every foot, or not every foot, every inch, which would be every 16 inches. Every 16 inches on center, right? And so if I click duplicate, and now I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because we're doing 1/8 of an inch. So that's like going 16/16 right there. I just went 1 inch. And actually, let me show you. If we line it up right, right there. Notice that the darker line is right there and the darker line is right there. Okay. That means we've got it lined up at the 16-inch mark. So 16 on center are those studs. Now, this is still just a very general class, guys. This is not this is not a construction class. So technically, some folks would measure 16 inches from the edge of the first stud. Just know that there's different ways of doing this so that materials line up differently. But for our purposes, we're just going to do from the 16 on center from every stud. I'm going to select this one and I'm going to click duplicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now check this out. If I hit duplicate again, it duplicates and does what I did to it. Watch. Duplicate. Boom. It put it where it's supposed to go. And I just keep clicking duplicate. Now, if I hit duplicate again, look what happens. That one goes way off over there. So I'll just need to grab this one, and I'm going to use the arrow keys and bring it back to there. And that should look almost exactly like what our drawing ended up looking like. Remember, we ended up with 2 close together at the end, and that's okay. Here at the bottom, I'm going to duplicate that bottom plate. And then I'm going to click and drag this little cone. Now, you don't want that. Okay, that is not right. So if that's what you see, then you need to go up till it gets to there. Okay. Congratulations. If you were following along, you have framed a wall in Tinkercad. We're not going to join any of these together. I'm going to change the colors of each of the walls just to keep them kind of separate so that we know which is which, what's going on. And so I'm just going to move this guy off to here. And then in the next video, we'll start working on the second wall and then the probably the door wall. And then we'll do the window wall in another video. Okay. All right, guys. If you have any questions, let me know. But that's pretty much how we're going to do. We're going to use Tinkercad to do a scale model of our shed. All right. So that's the end of the recording, and I'll see you in the next one.